Yo, what's up guys? It's Noah here. And in today's video, we're going to be breaking down the Week 11 Thursday Night Football Showdown slate on Draftkings. We got the Falcons and the Patriots playing this Thursday night. As always, guys, we're going to talk through this Showdown slate. We're going to break everything down, go from top to bottom, really hit on all the playable options, all the guys that I do have interest in. And then later, towards the end of the video, we'll kind of talk through roster construction, how I'm looking to build out my lineups, how I think you should be playing out the slate, who you should be playing at captain, or who I like to play at captain. We'll talk through correlation and break everything down. So before we get started, please do, guys, hit the like button down below. I always appreciate the likes. If you're new here, hit the subscribe button as well. And if you have not yet, check out the sponsor of the video, PrizePicks. I know a very large majority of you have already signed up for PrizePicks. PrizePicks is a newer DFS site. If you want to check them out, they're linked down below in the description. Or just when you sign up, be sure to use code NOAH. They will give you a 100% match on your first deposit up to $100. Again, they're a player prop based site, so it's basically just you pick the over or the under on the projections they have listed for all their players. It's very simple. It's not like Draftkings or FanDuel or Yahoo where you're having to build out a lineup, you're having to compete against other people. It's basically you versus the projections. So you can take a look at the fantasy point projections they have listed for the players right now. They will likely post more as we get closer to kickoff Thursday night. I'm recording this video on Wednesday afternoon. This is what they have available in terms of fantasy point projections, but they also have, passing yards, rushing yards, receiving yards. They have passing touchdowns as well. PrizePicks has a ton. They have obviously a ton of NFL stuff. They have NBA, college football, college basketball. Basically every sport imaginable is on PrizePicks. So if you want to check them out, guys, use code NOAH. They will match your first deposit. They will give you a free bet up to $100 when you do sign up with my code. But let's talk through this Showdown slate. Let's break it down. Start off at the top where we do have the two quarterbacks as the most expensive options here. Matt Ryan coming in at $10,800. Mac Jones coming in at $10,600. On this slate, I think both quarterbacks are going to be very safe, high floor options. I'd assume when the projections come out for this game, both quarterbacks are going to project as probably the top two plays, just because quarterbacks are always going to project very highly, and especially on this slate where we don't really have any elite wide receivers, any elite running backs. I mean, obviously, Cordell Patterson, Kyle Pitts have been really good this year. Damian Harris has shown upside, but we don't have like a Devonta Adams or, these elite wide receivers that can put up 35, 40 DK points. Like, that's just not what we're getting in this game. So I think Matt Ryan and Mac Jones are both two very high floor, safe options. I definitely would want to be building around the quarterbacks, I think. If I had to choose one of the two quarterbacks, I probably would side with Matt Ryan, just because Matt Ryan, especially this year and always, it seems like every year, the Falcons are just so pass heavy. We see Matt Ryan throw the ball 35, 40 times most weeks. Last week I don't really want to look too much into that game against Dallas just because they got the crap beat out of him. Matt Ryan didn't play at all in the fourth quarter. But in competitive games this year, we're seeing him drop back 35, 40 times. He's had multiple games getting the 300-yard bonus, has multiple games with multiple passing touchdowns. I know he doesn't really have any rushing upside. Neither of these quarterbacks do, but they can go for 250, 300 yards, get multiple touchdowns, and put up 20-plus DraftKings points. And I think if the quarterbacks put up 20 DK points, they are very likely going to be in the winning lineup, just because it's unlikely that a lot of these receivers or running backs put up massive games. So I definitely like the quarterbacks here. I think they're two of the better options on this slate. Cordell Patterson is a game-time decision. He's questionable right now. I am recording this video on Wednesday afternoon, so we don't have any update yet on Patterson. Assuming that he plays, I think he is a pretty good pay-up option. He's been really good so far this year with the Falcons. He's been a lot more involved than I think a lot of people expected. They've been using him as a running back. They've been lining him up as a receiver a lot. We've seen games where he gets like 20 touches. I mean, he had the one game against the Jets in London where he got 21 touches. I think Cordell's fine for sure. I do prefer the quarterbacks over Cordell Patterson, but I think, if Cordell Patterson plays, he is a really good option to pay up for. Kyle Pitts, I like a lot as well. I think Kyle Pitts might go a bit overlooked on the slate. Now, it is a showdown slate. Obviously, everyone's going to get ownership, but I don't think Kyle Pitts is going to be like 70 or 80% owned like the quarterbacks could be. I think Cordell Patterson might get more ownership than Kyle Pitts if he plays. I definitely like Kyle Pitts. I think he's one of these guys that does have, 100-plus yard upside, and a lot of players in this game don't really offer that, but Kyle Pitts can go out there and get 100-plus yards, can get you into the end zone, can score 25, 30 DK points. He has been very inconsistent this season, but we still have seen that upside. Had a really good game in London against the Jets, had a really good game against the Dolphins in Week 7. Basically, without Calvin Ridley, we know the target share is going to be massive for Kyle Pitts. He should be the guy that leads this team in targets most weeks. It's going to be either him or Patterson. So I think Kyle Pitts is a good option. I definitely like playing him at captain. I think he does have the upside to potentially be the winning captain on this slate. So I like Kyle Pitts quite a bit. Now, Damian Harris, I've not really been on much this year. A lot of Sunday main slates when the Patriots have been on the slate, like I don't really ever play Damian Harris. He has had some good games though this year, especially week 7 against the Jets, went for over 100 yards, multiple touchdowns. This is a pretty good matchup against the Falcons. I do want to look at how the Falcons have ranked against the run this season. I'd assume it's not that good, but I'm going to pull up their rushing yards allowed to opposing running backs. So the Falcons have allowed 840 rushing yards to opposing running backs, which is about middle of the pack in terms of touchdowns, rushing touchdowns allowed to running backs. They have allowed 9 rushing touchdowns, which is top 10. It's actually top 5. It's tied for 4th most in the league. So the Falcons have allowed a lot of touchdowns to opposing running backs. I think this does set up well as a pretty good spot for Damian Harris. I do expect him to resume his normal 15, 20 carry workload. The only issue I have with Damian Harris, especially on DraftKings, is that he doesn't really get any pass game usage. And with DraftKings being full PPR scoring, it's always nice to get running backs that can catch a couple passes. Damian Harris is probably not going to do that, but he does have the potential to run for 100 yards, get you a touchdown. I think he's a pretty good option too. I probably would prefer Kyle Pitts and Cordell Patterson if he plays, but I think Damian Harris is definitely viable. Stevenson I'm off of. Stevenson had a really good game last week, but now that Damian Harris is going to play, I'd expect Stevenson to go back to being the backup running back, probably only get 8 to 10 touches. It's just he's too expensive now with Harris expected to play. You can't pay $8,600 for Stevenson, so I'm pretty much off him. Wayne Gallman, I'm only going to consider at his price tag if Cordell Patterson is out. If Cordell Patterson plays, I have no interest in Wayne Gallman at $8,400. That's just too expensive of a price tag for him. We did see him get a lot of opportunity last week, but I think a large majority of that was due to them being just blown out. I know Wayne Gallman was like the only running back they used late in the game. I think Cordell Patterson was injured, so he didn't play, and I'm pretty sure Mike Davis, they just gave him the rest of the day off because of how bad they were losing. I wouldn't expect that many carries again for Wayne Gallman. Only way he gets that much opportunity is if Cordell Patterson sits. I think if Cordell Patterson sits, you will likely see a 50-50, maybe 60-40 split between Gallman and Mike Davis. For that, if that were to happen, then I think Gallman would be playable. But at his price point, he's going to be tough to go to. Only would consider him if Cordell Patterson's out. Jacoby Myers at 8K finally got into the end zone last week. Jacoby Myers has had just this unreal streak of not scoring a touchdown. This is his 2nd year in the league. I think he had I don't want to say he had a ton of, I can't remember how many receiving yards he had last year, but I know he had a ton of yards last year. Obviously, he was targeted a lot. He's been targeted a lot this season. He finally scored his first touchdown in the NFL last week, which is just absurd. He's been targeted, or he's had 50 catches this year, and he finally got into the end zone last week, which is just crazy. But Jacoby Myers on this slate, I think, is a pretty solid option. I definitely like the matchup against the Falcons. I don't think the Falcons' defense is really that good. I think this is a spot where Jacoby Myers can excel. I would assume the Falcons are probably going to be, or the Patriots. Well, game scripts kind of shining with them being being favorites here. They are 8-point favorites. I figured they would not be that high of favorites even on the road. But as 8-point favorites, maybe they don't pass a ton in this game. Maybe GameScript doesn't force them to. But I still would expect Jacoby Myers to be one of the first guys that Mac Jones looks to when he drops back to throw. Jacoby Myers has been a pretty heavily targeted receiver this year. We've seen games where he gets 14, 12, 9, 6 targets. Targets have been down a little bit these last few weeks, but I think a large majority of that has been due to GameScript. Obviously, the Cleveland game, they were playing with a massive lead. And then the Carolina game, they also were playing from ahead in that one. If they are playing from ahead here, maybe you don't see as many targets for Jacoby Myers. But at 8K, he is definitely in play for me. He is my favorite Patriots receiver for sure. I would prefer Myers over Kendrick Bourne. I'd prefer him over Nelson Aguilar as well. Kendrick Bourne is 7,600. Probably sees 4 or 5 targets. I would just rather play Jacoby Myers. I think Jacoby Myers is just a more talented receiver. I think his target share is a little bit higher as well, and it will be rest of season. But Kendrick Bourne's fine. Hunter Henry at 7K. I'm probably only going to go to Hunter Henry if Jonnu Smith is out again. We've seen Jonnu Smith be out the last few weeks. Hunter Henry got into the end zone twice last week, and he's actually been scoring a ton of touchdowns this year. If you look at the game log, he has scored a touchdown, and I think he scored 7 touchdowns in his last 6 games or something. He's been on an insane streak. Seems like he gets into the end zone almost every week. He is a touchdown-dependent player. If he doesn't catch a touchdown, he is very likely to disappoint at his salary. So if you pay $7K for Hunter Henry, you got to hope that he gets into the end zone because it's really unlikely that he puts up a good score without catching 1, if not 2 touchdowns. He's going to split time with Jonnu Smith if Jonnu Smith is active. If Jonnu Smith does not play, you would probably see more snaps for Hunter Henry. He did play on 82% of the snaps last week with Jonnu Smith out. So I would prefer Jonnu Smith be out. If he plays, Hunter Henry is definitely a riskier option at 7K. Not going to be someone I really prioritize on this slate. Then you got Russell Gage at 6,600. Ever since Calvin Ridley has been out, it's just been like this really weird, like four-headed committee at wide receiver for the Falcons. Last week, Russell Gage did play 65% of the snaps. You saw Tajay Sharp play 57%. Kendrick Bourne played 43%. Tajay Sharp played 57%. Zacchaeus played 43% of the snaps, and then Christian Blake played 31%. So they've just been kind of like mixing and matching, mixing in Gage, mixing in Tajay Sharp, Zacchaeus, Christian Blake. It's going to be really tough to predict which one of these guys has a good game, if any of them. I think Russell Gage is probably the most talented of all these receivers. I guess he would be my favorite at 6,600, but I don't have a ton of confidence in any of these Falcons receivers. I think these are guys you can definitely play. It's obviously a showdown slate, so we don't have a ton of options to choose from. Gage is definitely in play for me at 6,600, but I'm not that confident in him. Same could be said for Zacchaeus at 5,400. Zacchaeus' target share, not going to be great. He's going to probably get maybe 4 or 5 targets. Again, last week, Zacchaeus played on 43% of the snaps. I'm sure he probably lost some playing time due to the blowout. But again, I think he's basically like the wide receiver 3. At this point, I think he's behind Russell Gage and behind Tajay Sharp in the depth chart. So he's a riskier option, but still playable. I think for the most part, when Matt Ryan's not throwing to Kyle Pitts, he's just going to be spreading it around to all these other guys. I think Cordell Patterson and Kyle Pitts are going to be the guys that you expect to get the most volume in this offense, and then maybe Zacchaeus will get a couple targets, maybe Russell Gage get a couple targets, but I don't have a ton of confidence in any of these other Falcons pass catchers. Mike Davis, I do want to mention if Cordell Patterson is out. We kind of talked about it earlier. Wayne Gallman at his price point is only in consideration for me if Cordell Patterson sits. I think the same could be said for Mike Davis, who has been a pretty big disappointment this season. I think a lot of people, including myself, thought Mike Davis would be, kind of poised for a breakout year. He was really good with the Panthers last year, especially after CMC got injured. Signed this new deal with the Falcons. I was expecting him to be kind of a workhorse running back this season. And God, that just hasn't been the case. I mean, he's barely been involved. Even when he's gotten touches, he's been super inefficient with his touches. He's going to be a guy that's really tough to trust unless Cordell Patterson sits. Then I would think the workload would become a lot more secure for Mike Davis. I think his touches would increase if that were to be the case. Then he would be a pretty solid option at 5,800. But again, we got to wait on news for Cordell Patterson. Patriots defense here, I think is fine. The Patriots defense has been great this year. They've been one of the best defensive teams lately. Their defense in terms of fantasy, they've been forcing a lot of sacks, getting a lot of turnovers. I tend to avoid playing defenses on this slate, but this is a pretty gross slate in general. I think this could wind up being a low-scoring game. I feel like this game could go under the 47.5 total. So the defenses I'm fine with. I'd prefer the Patriots defense over the Falcons defense. Don't think I'm going to be prioritizing the defenses here, but I would include them in my player pool for sure if I was playing a lot of lineups. Nelson Aguilar at 5K, very similar to the Falcons receivers. I have no confidence in Nelson Aguilar. Last week, Nelson Aguilar played on 70% of the snaps. He's basically the wide receiver 2 behind Jacoby Myers. Maybe he gets 5 or 6 targets. He really hasn't shown any upside this year, but on a single game showdown slate with limited options, I think Aguilar is fine at 5K. But again, not a ton of confidence there. And then a lot of these guys down here, I'm just kind of off of, Brandon Bolden, especially now that Damian Harris is back. No interest in Brandon Bolden. The kickers, I think, look like pretty solid values here. This is a slate where I don't think there's any standout value play. So if you want to play one of, if not both kickers, I try to avoid playing both kickers, but I think the kickers are totally fine values. Definitely keep an eye on who's actually going to be kicking. I'd assume Younghoe Koo is going to be kicking for the Falcons, but for the Patriots, it looks like they put their kicker on injury reserve, or he's been on injury reserve all season, I guess. Nick Folk is their current kicker. He was limited in Tuesday's practice. Make sure Nick Folk is active. If he's not, just kind of see who is added to the player pool, whoever the kicker is going to be. I guess it would be this guy, Riley Patterson. Yeah, I guess Riley Patterson would be the guy that would get called up in case, Folk can't play. So actually keep an eye on that. I tend to, pay attention to kicker information. I normally never pay attention to, kicker news, but it's actually important on showdown slates. So, we'll have to wait and see who's actually going to be kicking for the Patriots Thursday night. But then the rest of these values, like Tajay Sharp, again, last week Tajay Sharp played on 57% of the snaps. The target share for him has been pretty minimal. He's not getting a ton of opportunity, but You know, if Matt Ryan throws the ball 35 times here, you could maybe see Tajaé Sharpe get 3, 4, 5 targets. If he gets into the end zone, he could be a pretty good play at his price tag. He's more of a dart throw for me. I don't have a ton of confidence in him, but playable at 3,600. Jonnu Smith, if he plays, I kind of like as a value at 2,400. Jonnu Smith, when he's been active this season, has been, you know, at least on the field a good amount. His targets have not been great. He hasn't been targeted a ton, but so far this year, his snaps, like he's played on at least 60% of the snaps in 1, 2, 3, and 4 games so far this year. I think it's, for the most part, it's going to be like kind of a committee between him and Hunter Henry, but you will see them run a lot of 2 tight end sets where they do have Henry and Smith on the field at the same time. If Jonnu Smith does wind up playing, I mean, he's kind of touchdown or bust. He doesn't really have much upside, but at 2,400, you know, we're kind of looking for value. We don't really have any standout value plays. I think Jonnu Smith would be a pretty decent value if he does wind up playing Thursday night. And that's probably it for the player pool. Like, J.J. Taylor, I'm not on anymore. I mean, he wasn't even in play for me last week with Harris out. Now with Harris back, I have no interest in J.J. Taylor. N'Keal Harry, if he plays, could be viable. I mean, last week, N'Keal Harry, I think he did play on a decent amount of snaps. He played on 52% of the snaps. He's not really been involved much at all this year, but if he's going to play on 50% of the snaps, maybe he sees a couple targets for only $600. He could be a viable dart throw. But this is a really gross slate, guys. There's not a lot of guys in this game you're going to feel confident in. A lot of the value plays are just like you're throwing darts with a lot of these guys. But, you know, it's what we're faced with when it comes to a showdown slate like this. Still wanted to talk through those guys and kind of give you my thoughts on this slate. We'll talk through roster construction real quick. So for me, like I said earlier, I think the quarterbacks feel like very safe, high floor options in this game. I definitely would want to be playing at least one of the 2 quarterbacks, I would think, if not both quarterbacks. I usually tend to avoid playing quarterbacks at captain. I try and play running backs, receivers at captain. So if I was not going to play a quarterback at captain, I think I'd be looking to like Cordell Patterson if he plays, Kyle Pitts, Damian Harris, Jacoby Myers. I think these are the guys I'd probably be using in the captain spot. I want to see if we can build like a Kyle Pitts captain lineup with both quarterbacks, see what that leaves us. So that leaves us 47.33 left per player. Probably going to have to play like one of the 2 kickers. We'll go with just Younghoe Koo for now, put him in at 4K. That leaves us 5,100 left per player for our last 2 spots. Don't really know what we could do here. We can maybe go like Jonnu Smith, and that would leave us enough to play like Kendrick Bourne. I would prefer to get up to Jacoby Myers there, but I guess we could go with like Kendrick Bourne if we wanted to do that. We can maybe play, like, God, a lot of these guys I just have no confidence in, man. I mean, I guess like N'Keal Harry played on 52% of the snaps last week. For $600, he could be a viable dart throw. Assuming he plays, you could plug him in. That would leave you enough to get up to like Damian Harris. So that's a build you could kind of do that I do like. I wouldn't even mind like a 2 kicker build just because of how bad the value is on this slate. I think you could see both kickers be in the winning lineup. You know, right now we don't know yet who's going to be kicking for the Patriots. But if it's either Folk or Patterson, we'll plug in Folk for now. You could do like 2 kickers in this build. That would leave enough to play like Mike Davis, who I would actually kind of like, especially if Cordell Patterson were to be out. So that's kind of a build that I like, especially if Cordell Patterson doesn't play, because Kyle Pitts, you know, his role, his target share should increase if Patterson's out. And then obviously Mike Davis's touches should be a lot more secure. His workload in general would be a little bit higher, you know, if there were to be no Cordell Patterson. But it's a really weird slate, man. It's a gross slate. This is one that I don't think I'm going to be going very heavy on. I rarely ever play heavy on these showdown slates. I've been getting a lot of my money in on Prize Picks. That's where I've been enjoying, you know, getting action in on the games, kind of taking a look at their projections, taking a look at their player props, going over or under. There are definitely some lines I like here, especially like if Cordell Patterson doesn't play, over 12 fantasy points for Kyle Pitts. I like that a good amount. His receiving yards as well is 52.5. Like, that's another pick I like on Prize Picks. Hunter Henry's receiving yards is 23.5, especially if Jonnu Smith were to be out. I think that would be a pretty viable one you could take, but you can take a look at their board, you know, see what Prize Picks has to offer. If you want to get some other action in on this game besides, you know, playing the showdown slate, you can take a look at what Prize Picks has to offer. You can make some picks for this Thursday night game and, you know, potentially win up to 10x your money on Prize Picks. If you do sign up, guys, use code NOAH. As I said earlier, they will match your first deposit, give you a free bet up to $100. But that's it for this Thursday Night Football Showdown slate. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope it helped. If you enjoyed, please do hit the like button, guys. Hit the subscribe button as well. And I think that's it. We will see you in the next video. Best of luck on the slate, guys, and thanks for watching. Peace.